jól látható átszerkesztés zajlik. Ez mit jelent? Ez azt jelenti, hogy egy olyan típusú közép-európai központ emelkedik fel, amit korábban nem láttunk a térképen. Mert nyilvánvaló, hogy a 40 milliós Lengyelország, és ha nem tudjuk, mennyi marad Ukrajnából, 20 millió vagy 30 millió, az egy gazdasági térséget fog alkotni. Katonai értelemben, biztonsági értelemben és gazdasági értelemben is. Az együtt, a lengyelekkel együtt, az jelent 60-70 millió embert. Az a kettő együtt, az több, mint Franciaország meg Olaszország, külön-külön persze. Németország utáni második legnagyobb terület. És ha az az amerikai kísérlet, hogy az európai gazdaságot, még a kínai gazdaságról is levágják, balti államok, Lengyelország, Ukrajna és még Románia, hogy a mi problémánkról is beszéljek egy fél mondat erejéig. Ez egy új sáv, ez egy új biztonságpolitikai zóna, és ennek gazdasági következményei lesznek. Ha megfigyelik, akkor az Egyesült Államok katonai erejét most már nem Németországba telepítik, mert biztonságilag nem Németország a kulcsország, hanem Lengyelországba telepítik az ukrán háború miatt. Átszerkesztés.
Ain't that what Nature Boy does, right? Nature Boy, right? Woo! That was a lot to unpack in that video. Everybody, is Brandon for the Bantu Sun. Thanks for joining us. What's happening, squad? All right, let me stop messing around. So that video was from Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. And that is just a few snippets. I really invite you to go to the website, www.thebantusun.com. We have the entire video posted there. We also shared that video on our Twitter account, which I suggest you follow as well. So I wanted to really share that video. As soon as I saw it, it pretty much vindicate what we've been saying. So if you've been following along with our content and what we're pushing out and our perspective and how we see things coming down the pipeline of geopolitics, what Prime Minister Viktor Orbán said was spot on to our analysis of how we see this whole conflict in Europe shaping out to be. Now, it's fair to give a background on the Hungarians. They are a unique bunch. So unlike the rest of the region and that central east region of Europe, the Hungarians are not Slavic. They're what they call Magyars. Magyars are pretty much more closely related to Finns and Estonians from that northern European part of Europe. So these, what you would say is these northerners, these horsemen came and they settled at the foot of the Carpathian Mountains in Central Europe, and they carved out Hungary within this, we'll say, this Slavic realm. So the Hungarians always saw themselves as a tad bit different, so they always had a little maverick in them. It's not so much they're like with this side or that side, but really steering their own course. And this is embedded in their culture and psyche because their feet are in the land that in Central Europe. They're embedded there psychologically and culturally in the center of Central Europe, as well as from their historical perspective of being a unique people in a unique place in Europe. And so I wanted to get that tidbit about the Hungarian people. This speech was made at what I believe to be the Hungarian Chamber of Commerce. And if you was watch the end of the video, he goes into saying basically, oh, I'm rambling. I don't even know how I even got to this subject anyway, but let's think about our longer term relationship. And you can see at points of this interview, he really feels lost and helpless. The Hungary is about 9.7 million people in population. It's not the biggest country geographically or demographically. And they're kind of caught in between these battles of elephants, the elephants being NATO and Russia. And you can kind of add China in that mix at this point. And so he goes through and he just starts peeling the bark of the geopolitical environment. Basically, we had cheap energy, decent relationships with the East, Russia, and that's being changed. They're still going to need to eat. They're still going to need resources. They're still going to get energy. But the question is, who is it coming from now? And he's alluding to and blatantly saying the fundamental structure of Europe is changing. It's this Western orientation that we continuously talk about. And this conflict in Ukraine is a smaller piece or a brick in a bigger wall of defense that the Western nations, NATO, are building out. If you look at the countries that NATO's invested in, that's NATO recruited in, that's NATO is fortifying, you'll see that it's pretty much dividing the continent of Europe. Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Ukraine, Black Sea, Turkey. There you go. Now, if you just take that landmass, that essential portion, Poland and Ukraine, this bifurcates the continent of Europe. These two nations alone. And he talks about, in the old days, people used to say Poland's going to grow to be a more powerful nation. And we kind of laughed at them and we didn't pay no attention. But now look at where NATO's investing. Who's getting the weapons? Who's getting the defense? Who is America finding the highest alliance with? And you put these countries together and you got a slab, especially if you throw Romania in there as well, with the exclusion of Turkey. But throw those Baltic nations in there. You throw the Central European nations in there, Poland, Ukraine, Romania. You're looking at nearly over 100 million people. Well, we'll see what happens, as he says, what's going to be left of Ukraine. But you're looking at 100 million people, and that's not even including Turkey. So with there nearly 100 million people. So you're looking at a massive block of heavily fortified nations on the eastern frontier of Europe. To me, and I think anybody that look at this critically, this defangs Western Europe. Because they're going to be smothered. They're going to be smothered in between the United States and the United Kingdom, and then these heavily fortified, allied, and very loyal countries of Eastern Europe. What is a Germany or Italy, two countries with some of the worst demographics you can imagine on this planet? Countries such as Germany, Italy, or a country like France going to do given this situation? They're pretty much going to be neutered from a political point of view, because they're forming a block here, a political block, basically. In NATO we trust, also a military block. You're forming an economic block with the EU currency. So all these things are coming together to create this very strong block. We made a video about this previously called Revenge of Central Europe. And I talk about the Prussification of this portion of Europe, this highly military state, which is going to keep Russia in check and keep Western Europe in check indirectly. So Prime Minister Orbán is just going through, spelling it out. He also talks about China. Now, if you have this portion cutting Western Europe off from Eastern Europe, it's also cutting off Asia, right? So these countries were going to be heavily invested, especially these small little countries that China wanted to get in with through the Belt and Road, your Serbia, your Hungaries. They wanted to get in these small countries where they know they can come in, throw some yuan around, soften up some feelings, and get some good relationships, because people will be allured by their market. But now what do you have? With a strong NATO presence, you bring a strong American presence. And Americans are always going to have a preference for their markets. So when America comes through and they want to put the sanctions on, not only are they cutting themselves off, but they're going to want to cut their allies off as well from these markets. And you can see Prime Minister Orbán understands, with us outsourcing our security, we're outsourcing our freedom, and we're outsourcing our independence. And these opportunities that we may have had being a smaller player that was able to get maybe some disparate or sweeter deals than our neighbors in Europe, those opportunities are going away, because now we're going to be in the block. We're going to be in that NATO block, that Western block, that American block. And so I just thought it was a great way to sum up all the things that we've been touching on as we've been talking about the evolution of what we see going on in Europe. And truthfully, I don't see how you get out of it. I look at Russia, and it's just not what it used to be, right? No matter what happens at the end of this, let's say Russia doesn't take all of Ukraine. Whatever sliver of Ukraine it gets, let's say $10 million Russian loyalists, $10 million Russian loyalists, the rest are going to be hardcore Western-backed Ukrainians. So that's another 30 or 40 million. As he said, he goes through the math. He said this block of people right here is going to be stronger than the other big countries in the continent right now individually. And so Russia, I think Russia and the United States always occupy that space as to what I would consider daughters of Europe, because they come from European thought and European founders, etc., and European colonists. And Russia and America kind of occupy the same space. And I think Russia was a lot more conservative with its mindset because it had a different outlook on things. Russia expanded throughout Asia, the toughest block, right? You got the Chinese, you got the Indians, you have the Mongolian Turks in Central Asia. And America kind of got to America, and they were the preeminent power, not from the jump, but they had a technological edge that they were quickly able to utilize before any of their neighbors were able to do it, right? It took Mexico too long to get independent and focused, and Canada never had the demographics to really pose a threat. Not only the demographic, but the political necessity to, since Canada's part of the Commonwealth. In America and Britain quickly amended their relationships after the Revolutionary War in the War of 1812. So it's really interesting that the Prime Minister was to affirm a lot of things that we've already talked about here. And we're going to continue to watch things play out. But remember what we said. This is, in this a rise of the Asia, this Asian century, as they say, the West is not going to take it lying down. And they always go back to the Malian dialogue here, guys. You friend, foe, or fodder in the game of geopolitics at this stage. And Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, he blatantly lays out that case. So that's our thoughts. We'll like to hear what you have to say. Please comment below. Also like, share, subscribe if you enjoy the content. Also check out our geopolitical puzzles that we have posted on Amazon. A lot of the thought and analysis we go through are derived from that product and the investment we made in better understanding the world that we live in and the resources out there. So once again, thanks for joining. Continue to take care. Until next time, Bantu up.